Any questions about the meditation experience or instructions before I get into tonight's topic?
Question about your conversation about Sangha. Can you talk about the difference between conflict and disagreement?
I don't know if I can. I don't know. I feel like disagreements are usually there's conflicting views.
Conflict seems a little bit
more intense.
Yeah, more violent.
Maybe there's so many levels of conflict. Sometimes it's just a disagreement, but how good are we at disagreeing? How often in a disagreement do we get stuck in, I'm right, you're wrong. My view is correct, yours is absolutely incorrect. And judgmental and critical, and then that can escalate. Or are we good at being like, oh no, I just have a different opinion, and the humility to be like, I could be wrong. Maybe you're right, but I don't see it that way. I have a different perspective. So I think sometimes it is disagreements when I say conflict, and sometimes it's bigger, and it's not just about opinions and views and stances, that it's actually about something that has happened, a betrayal or a wound or something unethical that has happened or that we need to address, with still a process of forgiveness and reconciliation and staying together as a community without needing people to be perfect.
To me, the biggest conflicts are internal.
Yeah. Well, and part of what the meditation experience, I think, does is as we can become more kind and tolerant and towards ourselves, we become more kind and tolerant towards others. Often when there's a real intolerance and quick to fight, it's this mirror effect of I don't have much tolerance for myself and I don't have much tolerance for others. I think very few really reactive people like themselves a lot or very kind or compassionate to themselves. It's usually, that my sense is that as it shifts internally, it also shifts in how we relate to each other. Yeah, well, I'll jump into, in a series of teachings, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path. We are on the sixth factor of the Eightfold Path, that is about effort, energy. Quick reminder for any of you who aren't totally familiar with the four truths. The first truth is the acknowledgement that suffering is normal. Dukkha is the word, and that everybody experiences it. It's that life is going to be difficult sometimes, and it's unavoidable. On some of it's unavoidable. And a lot of our suffering, second noble truth, is self-created. Is created by craving for life to be different than it is, not meeting it with understanding and acceptance, but craving for life to be pleasant all of the time, and it's just not pleasant all of the time. And meeting all of the pain with aversion and judgment and resentment creates suffering on top of the pain. And Buddhism separates the way that I think about it. There's pain, which is unpleasant and a given and unavoidable. Some pains unavoidable. And then there's what do we do with the pain? How do we respond to it? And if we don't respond wisely, we create suffering. There's pleasure, which is also unavoidable. And how we relate to it, either we have joy and enjoy the impermanent pleasures that come through our experience, or we cling to them, crave for them, get attached to them, and we create suffering. So this is the simple equation of Buddhism. And the third truth, which is that It's possible in this lifetime, through our practices, through our discipline, through this eightfold path that we're talking about, to come to a place where we don't suffer so much, where we live more in harmony with reality rather than fighting it, where we learn to meet pleasure with non-attached appreciation. We learn to meet pain with compassion. We learn to see more clearly and respond more wisely. And it's a slow process, as most of you know. It's not like you learn Buddhism and all of a sudden you're happy and joyous and free. You practice your ass off for decades and your suffering decreases and decreases and your happiness increases and increases. But it's a very gradual path of awakening. The Eightfold Path can be broken down into 3 sections. We're starting the 3rd section tonight. The first section, which is understanding reality and having wise intentions, is wisdom. The first section is developing a wise view, a wise understanding, and wise intentions. The middle part of the Eightfold Path is all about ethics, morality, how do we communicate, how do we act, how do we earn money. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about livelihood. And all of it's really about karma. It's really about, like, what kind of karma am I developing for myself? Am I creating positive momentum with my communications, with my actions? And this big encouragement, if you want to get free, to avoid the actions, the communications, the livelihoods that create negative karma for yourself, causing harm to others. So it's it's just an encouragement. Buddhism, I don't feel like is full of a bunch of rules, the way I think about it anyways. It's more just like, here, reflect on this, look at this. How do you suffer in communication and speech? And how do you suffer around your actions? How do you suffer around work? Do you suffer around, these things? All of it for an investigation, as I said in the beginning. Come see for yourself. The last section that we'll spend the next few weeks talking about, a couple weeks at least, is about meditation. So wisdom, ethics, meditation. And the 6th factor tonight is effort. Now, the Eightfold Path is not linear, do this and then do that. It's seen as a wheel. And these are 8 spokes on a wheel. And that there's like a central hub. And that every spoke, in some way or another, is supporting the other spokes. Any spoke is missing, the wheel is going to be wobbly. But effort, I feel like they're called conjoining factors. I feel like this whole thing is based on effort. Maybe many people would say, like, mindfulness is the most important. First, mindfulness will lead to wisdom, it'll lead to ethics, but it takes a lot of effort to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness doesn't happen without the effort to train the mind to be present. You can't just tell your mind to, like, stay. It takes all of this effort to come back over and over to the present with the investigation, with the kindness, with the training of what we're doing. All of it's effort. And the big question is, how much effort? What's balanced effort? What kind of effort? What is too much effort? What is not enough effort? How much should I meditate? How strict should I be about my ethics? How generous should I be? Is there such thing as too much generosity? Is there such thing as how forgiving? Can I be forgiving and still have good boundaries? Where's the balance in efforts? One of the, and Buddhism is called the middle path. So when we're talking about effort, the Buddha did say, I tried too hard for years. I tried too hard. I went to an extreme. There is such thing as being overly ambitious about your awakening. He said, I went too much effort. I was fasting all of the time. I was starving myself. I was living naked in the forest as an ascetic, torturing my body. I was trying a little too hard. And he said, but also there's this other extreme of just indulging all of your desires and calling it yoga, or whatever, meditation, abundance, something. You know, we have to find some middle path. And there's a lot of effort in the middle between the two extremes. There's a couple of nice images about effort, the simple ones. One is about the kind of effort on the path. Now, this isn't just for meditation. Some of this is about like, oh, how strict should I be with my meditation? How hard should I try when I'm meditating to be present? But it's bigger than just meditation. It's all of it, with my ethics, with my study, with my service work, with my all aspects of our life. He says it's like a tuned instrument, a stringed instrument, that in order for this instrument to sound right, you have to tighten the strings. If they're too loose, if you're not enough effort is too loose, and then it's not in, what is it? Not chord. You're not in tune. It's not in tune if it's too loose. And also if it's too tight, too much effort, too uptight about your practice, also not in tune. Maybe there's the same thing if we think about this as a 8-spoked wheel and you have to tighten spokes. And if you tighten them too much, they'll break. And if you tighten them not enough, again, it'll be wobbly. So not too tight, but not too loose. And there's a way in which I think only you can be the judge, can be the arbiter, and there's this very simple test. Am I suffering? Right? We can just ask ourselves, am I suffering about communication, about being present, about what my mind is doing? And if you're out of balance in some way or another, maybe a little bit more effort. But then sometimes you say, okay, I'm putting too much effort in. Now I'm stressed out about my meditation. I'm sitting 4 hours a day and I'm striving a little too hard. I'm becoming impatient. I'm becoming attached. I'm becoming a little too rigorous with my practice. And I need to pull back some. I need to relax about the goal and just do the practice. So not too tight, not too loose. And maybe you can look at if you're new, you'll kind of see this unfold in your practice. And if you've been doing it for a while, you know this balancing that we're always trying to find. My sense is that rarely do we just like get in the middle and stay there. I know for myself over the years, decades of practice, that I sort of wander on and off the middle. Sometimes I feel like, oh yeah, I've got a good, steady, balanced. And then sometimes I'm like, nope, went too far, got too ambitious. And then I come back and sometimes like, nope, got too lazy, not practicing enough, not being vigorous or enough. And then it's this sort of like making progress by failing, by, going too far this way, like a pendulum maybe. Like you go, there's the middle, there's the middle, there's the middle. I think rarely do people just kind of like cruise the middle the whole time. I think it's this sort of like back and forth. And then maybe they become less over the years, or closer to the middle. Does that make sense? There's some the way it's reported anyways is that no matter what, if you practice with some Burmese meditation masters, no matter what you report to them that's happening in your meditation practice, their reply to you as a student will be more effort. Maybe the translation actually is keep going rather than more effort, more practice, keep going. Like, okay, cool. You are having some mindfulness experiences and some concentration experiences and some compassion. Keep going. But for some reason, it got translated as more effort. So then all of the people that went in felt like failures of like, oh, I'm not trying hard enough. It's much different response if somebody says to you, keep going. Sounds good. Keep going. Rather than try harder. You're not doing it right. More effort. The traditional way that the Buddha talks about, or in the suttas talks about effort, is that there are four efforts. The effort to avoid, we'll talk about that. The effort to, avoid unwholesome, avoid attachment, avoid aversion, avoid hatred, avoid the causes of suffering. If you can, unwholesome mind states, actions, attitudes. I think we could take it further than just what's happening in the mind. Avoid the activities of your life that cause you suffering. Like if you're an alcoholic, avoid alcohol. If you're a sex addict, avoid pornography. Avoid the things that have been a source of suffering. Avoid those behaviors. Avoid those things that are going to lead to that suffering. So avoid. And then there's the second one, which is if you aren't able to avoid and it is happening, you're in the midst of something that's causing you suffering, abandon it. So I didn't successfully avoid, getting angry, but rather than holding to that anger, that rage, that resentment, abandon it. Don't stay stuck in it. Let it arise. It's impermanent. We'll come back to abandon because there's lots of different levels of abandoning the unwholesome that has arisen. Avoid it, abandon. Those are the kind of for the causes of suffering. And then cultivate the wise, the good, the wholesome. Create mind habits of compassion, of kindness, of generosity. Actually train your mind, train your heart in these positive emotional states. You can do it. It is possible through meditation. You can train, cultivate, experience non-attachment and compassion and generosity and love and forgiveness. Put the effort into cultivating these what are called, skillful or wholesome experiences. And then when you are cultivating them or they are arising all by themselves, sustain, appreciate. Okay, sometimes people get the instruction to pay attention to their breath 20 years ago, and then that's all they do. And all of this love and joy is arising in them, and they're just back to the breath. And the Buddha's no, that's arising. Turn towards it. Appreciate it. Cultivate it. Sustain that wisdom. You don't have to ignore your mind forever. It's not all bad news. Some of the, enlightenment factors that are going to come are to be cherished, to be enjoyed, to be sustained, not clung to, right? And there's that fine line between sustaining and appreciating and enjoying and trying to keep. The core is, it's all impermanent. Don't try to keep any of it, but fucking enjoy it when you're having pleasant, wise experiences. avoid, abandon, cultivate, sustain. 4 efforts. Mostly traditionally talked about as in our meditation. Avoid unwholesome mind states. Now, the way that I think about it, I don't know if this is what the Buddha was talking about or not, is because I haven't had much luck just telling my mind to not have unwholesome mind states. I haven't had much luck just like, hey, mind, stop that. But the more you're mindful of your own mind, the more we start to see there's volitional and non-volitional thoughts. There's sometimes where the mind does all by itself some unwholesome, some anger, some hatred, some lust, some comes out of nowhere. But there's that moment, if you're mindful of, am I going to get hooked into this, identify with it, and feed it? And I believe that that's where we have some free will with mindfulness training. That's where we have some free will. And that's where we can avoid getting hooked. I don't think you can make your mind stop producing negative mind states. Many of you have heard me, I believe that even the fully enlightened Buddha did not have the ability to fully avoid negative mind states. There's this character that shows up before the Buddha's enlightenment, during the Buddha's enlightenment, and his whole life after, that is called Mara, which is the personification of negative mind states. The Buddha is not able to avoid Mara from arising before. The difference is before enlightenment, he takes it personal. That's us. Some afflictive emotion comes and you take it personal. I am angry and I'm going to do something about it. Later, you start to see, oh, this is just anger. And the only thing that really it needs is some compassion and forgiveness. I don't need to spill it out onto anybody else. The Buddha, in his awakening, changes his relationship so radically that now when those thoughts arise, he just says, sorry. What does he say? No, he doesn't say that. He just says, I see you, Mara. Not successfully, completely avoiding the arising, but successfully avoiding taking it personal. I see you. I see that this is just some level of an impersonal survival instinct-based emotion, and that it's not worth suffering about. I see this greed, this hatred, this delusion, this confusion that has arisen in my mind. I haven't been able to avoid it, but I am not going to take it personal as I, me, mine, who I am, and suffer about. Does that make sense? I feel like when you first hear that, you're like, how the fuck are we going to do that? But the more you meditate, the more you start to see, oh, I have a relationship to my mind. Rather than believing it, rather than doing whatever it says, there starts to be some discernment and some choice. How am I going to relate to this thought, this feeling, this experience? I see you. Avoid getting entangled with the thought, not avoid the arising of it. So sometimes you'll get to the place where it's just arising and passing and you're observing it. And then I feel like the second piece, which is, okay, then sometimes you wake up in the middle of it. You haven't avoided it, you're entangled. Here I am in the midst of resenting, in the midst of judging, in the midst of, you wake up like, oh, man, I'm really suffering about this. I'm really attached to my view, to my opinion, to my self-righteous indignation. You wake up to it. And that's why he's saying, like, let go, abandon it. Don't keep going down that path of suffering. When you wake up to this is suffering, abandon it. Disengage. Often in meditation, we do that by simply coming back to the body. I was in this mind state and I was really suffering about it. Just disengage. Come back to the breath. Come back to the body. Come back to the present. So in that argument, again, that I've had 100 times in my mind, abandon that argument. Come back to here. And again, my sense is that sometimes abandon seems so like you'll be able to just stop. Like abandon greed. Like I'm just going to stop craving. Abandon craving. Abandon aversion. It doesn't seem to work that way. We gradually loosen my experience is I feel like the first thing that happens is that we change how much we believe in it. I don't know if there's a shift of our understanding. I think in my own subjective experience, when I came to meditation, I think I actually believed in hatred as a necessary defense mechanism, quality, like that. I thought that hatred was good to hate. It was necessary to hate. And I didn't understand how hatred, and it was good to crave, necessary to crave. I didn't understand how greed and hatred and craving and aversion were destroying my life. I just thought that that's just what you did. And it was good. Like, get as much pleasure as you can and hate everybody that gets in the way of your pleasure. The cops, whoever. And that when it came to abandoning, I wasn't able to just stop craving and aversion. But first, I abandoned the belief that there was anything good or skillful or wise about craving and hatred. I was able to let go, to wake up, to say, like, this is a fucking dead end of a life based on chasing pleasure and trying to avoid pain and being resentful all of the time. This just doesn't work. It's impossible. There's no happiness. There's no ease. There's no peace in this existence of craving and aversion. Abandoning the great American lie, the great human lie, not just American, that consuming material things and having pleasure is going to make you happy. And that, just be mad at everything that gets in the way and everyone and every circumstance. Does that make sense to you? Because I feel like that's been my experience. At first, we abandoned belief in our delusional perspective and maybe our delusional conditioning in our societies that say there's a material solution, there's a sensual solution. We wake up to say there is no material solution. That's why we meditate. There's a spiritual, there's a psychological, there's an emotional solution, but there's no material solution. You can't buy it. You can't purchase it. You're not going to get it from stuff or from sense pleasures. The more we start to see how impermanent everything is. So we have those awakenings. Maybe part of effort too is reminding ourselves of staying on this middle path. And I feel like that wandering back and forth is that, like, there's part of you that knows that happiness is an inside job, that there's no external solution. But sometimes you forget. Sometimes I forget. And I'm like, yeah, but a dirt bike would really be a great idea. And I'd be so happy if I was just ripping up the trails and the forests. So happy. And some, not that. We forget. And it's like, oh, nope, back here. That doesn't work. That's pleasure. That's not happiness. That doesn't work. It's inside. You can be fucking miserable in the middle of the most pleasant experience. You have that experience? Surrounded by beauty and maybe abundance or whatever. Like everything should be good. If you haven't had that experience yet, I hope you have it. So that you become totally disillusioned with that thing that the mind says, which is like, I would be happy if we, get to that place where it's like you have everything that you thought was going to make you happy. Most of us have been there on some level or another. I thought I'd be happy if I had money or success or the right relationship or the right amount of drugs and sex and rock and roll. And then I had it all for an hour. But that delusional idea of like, we forget impermanence. We forget that we can get it, but it's not going to last. So abandoning these delusional ideas that there's some sort of material, sensual, or even a perfect mind. Mara is, afflictive emotions are part of the human condition. We have to, where we ended the meditation tonight, may I learn to be at ease with myself just as I am, with Mara, with judging mind, comparing mind, lusting, aversion, with the human condition. May I learn to be at ease, at peace, not free from all difficult mind states, avoiding taking them personal. When you're taking them personal, try to abandon, to disengage, to let go. And you'll see that the more you meditate, the more you build that skill. You'll get better and better at it over the years. And that really is skill-based practice, this path, this eightfold path. Not to be believed, but to be experienced directly. And cultivate the true causes of happiness. Which is not the material and the sensual, but is forgiveness. You want to be happy? Learn to forgive. Because resentment is the number one cause of unhappiness for most people. Learn to be forgiving. Cultivate forgiveness towards yourself, towards your own mind, towards others, towards this world of ignorance and oppression and confusion that we live in. So easy to be pissed off, to be judgmental, to be critical. And there's still, you can be forgiven and still have discernment of like, yes, this is a world of ignorance and oppression and confusion. That's still true. I'm just not going to suffer about it. I'm going to try to have compassion and engagement and come from a place of love and kindness, generosity, not hatred and anger, and it doesn't get us very far. And I like the term cultivate because it's pointing towards like, this isn't just, again, they're not decisions we can make. They're practices. You have to, cultivate. You have to plant the seed. You have to water it. You have to make sure that the environment for wisdom to arise, for forgiveness, for compassion, takes effort. It's not a decision. I forgive you is not a decision that we can make. It's a practice that we have to do over and over and over. We're not just like, I'm going to be generous isn't a decision. Generosity is a practice of giving our time and our attention and our resources to each other. Sharing. Ongoing effort into being generous. being kind. They're all, right? It just takes effort. And then you can see in your own life, we can all look at what's difficult. For some people, generosity is easy. So do that, cool. For some people, generosity is really hard. There's a clinging, it's hard to give, I feel like I don't have enough. Don't wait until you're feeling generous to start practicing that. Put the effort in, even though it's difficult, like, of course. We don't want to wait until we're feeling magnanimous and forgiving to start practice forgiveness. We want to wait until we're feeling generous before we start practicing. Generosity is the antidote to selfishness. In order to get out of selfishness and self-centeredness, we have to give even though we're not feeling like it. I mean, I learned this so much from recovery, where you're not feeling generous, but the whole kind of recovery thing, which is like, be of service. And the more you are of service to the other people that are coming here to, the more you'll actually start to feel it and get the benefits of generosity. Cultivate, practice, develop. I mean, one of the core things that we're trying, wisdom, right? Impermanence. See it everywhere. Practice seeing impermanence. Not just in your meditation, but in the world. Everything's impermanent. So everything's an opportunity for cultivating wisdom of impermanence. And catch it every time your mind gets stuck in the delusion of like, this is going to last forever. Your mind say that to you sometimes in the midst of a difficult emotion or of a wonderful romance. This is going to last forever. Is always a delusion. But our minds say it. We forget, no, this is going to change and it's going to get different and there's going to be a process here that unfolds. It's not going to last forever. The last one, sustain. When your practice is bearing fruit, when you're happy, when you're joyous, when you're, feeling forgiving, and enjoy that. Sustain that, turn towards that, appreciate. Oh, this is what I've been meditating all of these years for, this feeling of peace. Don't just ignore it, just, enjoy it, cherish it. Soak it up. And know that it's also impermanent, so don't get too attached. But I like that there's this instruction here towards enjoying, sustaining, connecting with these wholesome mind states, emotions, experiences that happen. When you find a community that you connect with, sustain that connection. Keep connecting. Don't kind of just be like, oh yeah, that was cool. Like, put the effort into being part of that community. Some thoughts about effort. I could go in some other directions, but what questions does it bring up for you about your practice, about Buddhism? Please.
What are your thoughts on, can one seek ease prematurely? So, does that get into denial? Is there sometimes a necessary need to hit bottom? Does the practice in your own?
The question is, could one seek ease prematurely? sometimes we need to suffer a bit more before we're ready? I don't know the answer. I think that the traditional Buddhist answer is no. Wherever you're at, you are worthy of ease, of happiness, of freedom. It doesn't have to get worse. Now, there's a kind of addiction perspective that says the addict needs to hit bottom before they're going to be ready to do the hard work of recovery and finding ease. I don't think that's the Buddhist perspective. I think the Buddha says the Dharma is here whenever you're ready, if you're willing, whatever level of dissatisfaction you're at. I mean, that's the kind of core of the motivation. If you're not dissatisfied on some level with something, why are you going to meditate? Why are you going to take on this discipline practice? Now, there are some people who say, life was pretty good, but I knew it could be better. There's that 10% happier guy. He's like, my life is pretty good, but what if I was 10% happier? Not like life was fucking miserable and I was so desperate that I would do anything, but like actually life was pretty good. But even that, I wasn't satisfied. I wanted more happiness. I wanted to increase. So my sense is there's some level of disillusionment, some level of dissatisfaction, or some wisdom that says like, yeah, it's okay, but I know I could be more free. I know I could be more awake, more at ease. Now there is the other phenomena where we can use our spiritual practices to create a false sense of ease rather than actually doing the first noble truth, which is turn towards the suffering and feel it. We can say like, oh, no, I'm going to use this to just go, I want to just go right to not feeling it, avoiding it, bypassing it. Every difficult emotion that arises, come back to the breath, rather than actually turn towards it. Third foundation of mindfulness, which we'll probably talk about next week. Turn towards your mind. Learn to have that intimate relationship with it, including all of these unwholesome mind states. Please.
When you know, like, if you're giving too much effort in something and it's not being reciprocated back to you, you know, how do you tell yourself to walk away if you want something so bad?
Yeah. In a relationship?
Yeah.
Well, you're sort of answering it yourself, right? Like when it's not being reciprocated. Right? Like that's
yeah,
that.
Then you look at, I look at myself and it's like, well, if I just do this, and this,
yeah.
It might be.
Well, at some point we just have to say, okay, I feel like I actually have done this, and this. And see, like, actually I'm chasing, if it comes to that place where it's like, no, it's not. I've showed up in a good way and
It's hard for me to do.
to let go. Letting go is hard. But at some point it has to come from your own knowing that this is not healthy, it's not skillful, it's not loving, it's not whatever it isn't, whatever's missing. Buddhism gives us a practice that says actually we're responsible for our own happiness. And when you're really taking that responsibility, then you can share that in a relationship with someone else. Hopefully they're taking responsibility for their happiness and you're taking responsibility for your happiness. And then there's that union that can happen. But the more you know that, the more you, like, this is the first factor of the path, the more you understand, I am responsible for my happiness. they can't make me happy. I can't make them happy. I love them. I want them to love me. Maybe they do love me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a healthy relationship. And that sometimes there are, boundaries and being willing to have some heartbreak when you know this is not being reciprocated. Please, Tracy.
What about to be back onto that, like, what if you just stop cleaning? So what? You know what I mean?
And see what happens.
To see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always the instruction, is stop clinging.
Yeah.
But it's so much easier to say than to do. Like, and I hear that. That's where the question, like, how do I stop clinging? There's no simple, like, just stop clinging. I mean, that's all of what our practice is teaching us. Let go one moment at a time. And then Ellen.
There is that one movie, I don't know if you all remember, but it's called He's Just Not That Into You.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah.
And so if someone's not into you or they are into you, you're going to know it. And it shouldn't have to be so difficult to work in a relationship. It should be organic. And you're selling yourself short and not getting what you deserve, I think, in my opinion.
Yes, of course, but I feel like that's where the question was coming from. Is like, I know it's not being reciprocated, but I still am really having a hard time letting go. There's still that idea that maybe, but if, what if? Yeah. And that book and movie were like, nope, let go.
And she done well.
Right. As they always do in the movies. Alan, last thought.
It seems to me that one of the most nefarious claims is clinging to our own unhappiness. It's more than just letting go. There's a whole many layered kind of addiction.
Yes.
Can you talk about piercing those layers?
My feeling is the more we turn inward, this question about clinging to our own unhappiness, identifying with our own unhappiness, and piercing those layers, the more we become intimate with our own mind, heart, emotional patterns, relationship patterns. Sometimes we see that actually it's not success that is difficult, or it's not failure or pain that is difficult to tolerate, but that it's success, or it's, for some people, it's really hard to tolerate love, intimacy. Like, we crave it, we think we want it, but we see actually my core formation was that was not a safe thing. It's not something I got that much in my early life. And so now I'm in this pattern of clinging to unhealthy relationships or painful experiences. I remember when my father was teaching, and I heard him talk about, like, when we're so comfortable, so familiar with the suffering, that's what we know. And that freedom is scary. That we can go kicking and screaming towards freedom, clinging to the abuser, rather than, even if the abuser is ourselves, our own, rather than saying, like, oh, I want to be free. I know I want to be free, but I don't know what that's foreign. That's the unknown.
Yeah. I think between pain and the unknown, most people will take pain.
Between pain and the unknown, most people will take pain. So Faulkner, Ted saying, is a Faulkner quote. It seems true for a lot of us. Maybe not everybody, but that there's that habitual pattern of the familiar. And so we have to look at, how am I doing that in my relationships? How am I doing that in my internal attitudes? And all of this effort stuff, which is like, how do we break free from those habitual patterns? How do we abandon, avoid, cultivate the opposites with the understanding that some of it's going to be hard to tolerate and that it takes some getting used to. Just like sitting in meditation and learning to be uncomfortable is hard to tolerate. It's also hard to tolerate being at ease when you've had a life of tumultuous uneasiness. Like, what's this unknown, peaceful experience? We're out of time. Thank you for your practice, your consideration. As always, these talks, the Dharma is offered for your contemplation, your consideration, not to be believed and worshipped, but to be practiced, to be developed and trusted on your own direct experience. So, class is done by donation. George is at the desk tonight. Please practice generosity. Make a donation on your way out if you can. If you're at home and you can donate, please do. I think the Venmo thing is on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, you can send a donation to Noah-Levine-17 at Venmo if you care to. 2 retreats open for registration October. There's a flyer up there. Come sit with us for a week. And then also January with Jason Siff, who was here last week. He and I are going to teach for a week in January. Myself and the group of people that I'm training to teach are going to teach the October retreat. Come to one of those if you can. And come sit with us on Wednesday. Wednesday is really quiet and small. And join us in the quiet, small group if you'd like. May any goodness that comes from our practice be shared in all directions with all beings. May each one of us come to awakening, to healing, and together may we create a positive change on this planet. See you soon. Welcome.